Okay, this is my channel, my YouTube, my Facebook, and while we have free speech, I would like to vent again. I'm going to pause because, do you know what? Sometimes it feels like it's not worth it. Okay, I'm back, and my bad if I use, sometimes use my YouTube channel to vent. I met my mother's home help in the town today. I said, I hope you're not upset with me. And she reminded me of a very nasty nun. She said, yes, I am. You stay away from me. And I'm sure that will delight the trolls. You know, and they can F right off. But it's just, I'm not willing to be shamed. And I'm not willing to be bullied. And it just makes me aware that it's not just children that are becoming the property of the state, but it's the elderly as well. And I just find this prevalent attitude that if you care for an elderly person in any way, whether officially or unofficially, you have the right to diss their family, believe everything they say, and elderly people are renowned for twisting the truth. And you have the right to be rude to their families, all the while being paid because it's your job. So obviously one would prefer to have a good carer or home help than a bad one or no one. But I don't think the position warrants blackmail. It feels like emotional blackmail, that if you upset your mother's home help, you know, you're in big trouble. And, you know, the video I made about my frustration with no plumber, and just, you know, we managed to get through by, I just woke up every 2-3 hours through the nights of being snowbound and drained the tank, and my boys went up and hand emptied it with saucepans, and we put boiling water into the overflow pipe that was frozen. We got through, but somebody else put up a status, emergency plumber needed immediately. And I know from 2009 and 2010, when I had burst water pipes in the attic, and one time when I was away for 10 days for Christmas, and the house was uninhabitable for 3 months. It was like, it was a disaster. It was just like horrendous. And it just saddens me. I suppose I'm kind of thinking like the Amish or the Quakers that, you know, or even the Foleys back in the early 80s when the farmers would get a tractor out and the neighbours would pull together and somehow a problem would be solved, and there wouldn't be somebody with burst pipes without a plumber. There wouldn't be somebody with, you know, just old age and the carers told by their bosses not to venture out because they're not insured. I in no way implied that that was the fault of the home help, although living on the same estate, it did seem a stretch. And in the back and forth with her daughter, I was told she visited 12 patients the day before. And I have to ask, like, you know, what's a woman, I think she's my age, maybe a bit older, 60s, you know, what's she doing with 12 clients as a home help, working so hard at her age? You know, if she's got children that are successful, I don't know if her husband's dead, but it just seems to me kind of tragic. But the point I'm making is I didn't deserve the rudeness from that lady today. I made it clear both in comments that it was not about my mother's home help, it was not even primarily about my mother. It was about that I'd been looking for a plumber for so long, and, you know, regardless of my good or bad points, it just made me sad that it was impossible to get a plumber, whether it was an emergency or not. Thank God I have now had a plumber, well, a friend actually, who was able to do plumbing, fix the overflow. So that's sorted now. I'm grateful for prayer. But the trolling website has done an article on my vent and made it all about home helps and my mother and this, that, and the other. Probably contacted the people that commented on my video, which I reverted to private before I actually got a 30-day ban. It was nothing to do with that I got a ban. It was I reposted something Anthony Pike wrote, and somebody reported it. I mean, he doesn't hold back. He blogs and emails, and there's not as much censorship with that, with YouTube or as there is with YouTube or Facebook or Twitter. But so I had put that video to private, but I may well put it up again, because I will not be shamed either by local opinion. Oh, my mother's the most wonderful person you could ever meet. I'm sure she is. I'm sure she is. But she gets paid very well by the health board to work for 12 patients, clients, whatever, in Oldcastle, who are entitled to home help. So, you know, I don't ask you to be emotional about my work in journalism. I don't ask my children to say, oh, my mum's the nicest mother you could find. It's got nothing to do with my work. And your mother being wonderful has got nothing to do with her work. She chooses, or necessity demands, that she works helping 12 patients or clients or whatever in the local area at a well-paid rate. And that does not qualify her to tell me to stay away from her. To have a whole drama about, oh, our mother, how could you insult our mother? It wasn't even about that. It wasn't even about that. And with regard to another professional carer's comments, a friend, if I'd say friend, an acquaintance, a neighbour, saying if the families did their bit, we wouldn't have to. Well, yeah, that's true, but presumably you trained and qualified and accepted jobs gladly, you know, for your form of employment. And the truth is, with regard to my mother, I cared for her and my father, and you know, 2 children with special needs, and neighbours, anybody that came looking for help. You know, I've done my bit with that, and you know, helped my mother leave an abusive relationship, helped her secure what was technically regarded as a 2-bedroom home, which was to include a carer. And one of my sons volunteered for that job. And then once I'd spent a year or 2 helping my mother with my children establish a life separate from my father, she left him at age 79 with below the poverty line income, because he'd always kept her poor. And I spent probably a year and a half helping her stabilise, getting her health back on track, you know, negotiating maintenance. She'd worked with my dad all his life, not only raised 5 children, lost 3, you know, but helped him set up businesses, helped him purchase Rainbow Farm, which, unbeknownst to her, he put in his own name and not including hers. So I helped, my children helped, my son decorated and did all the odd jobs, my daughter interior designed and prepared the little house for my mother like it was a hotel. She only had to walk in. My daughter made beautiful homemade curtains. She shopped for everything down to teaspoons, toasters, you know, just everything. it literally was like a little palace for my mother to walk into. But once my children and I had done that for a year and a half, my younger two siblings, who stand to clean up with Rainbow Farm, which was originally a 65-acre small holding, they got worried because they thought, no, Angie and the kids are getting too close to Mum. She might change her will, or we might not have so much control, or Mum might kick up now she's discovered that, the farm was just put into Dad's name illegally. And or she might continue to wake up, or whatever their reasoning was. They persuaded my mother to get rid of me, get rid of my son, get rid of my children, change the locks, and go back to relying on my two younger sisters. It was me organised home help for my mother. It was, I don't need credit for everything I did, but my mother's 84, and she was told she had leukemia and, about 7 years to live, and that turned out to be about 14, 15 years ago, and it didn't kill her. My father, they had a failed knee surgery, and I fought tooth and nail to not have his legs straightened and a lifetime prescription of painkillers doled out, but I fought to actually have corrective surgery done on his knee, which was done. I discovered he was passing out with a carotid artery blockage. I got him a pacemaker. I really, really advocated for and did the good, daughter thing. And both my parents, partly because of my younger sister, feeling that her empire was threatened by me being the primary carer for our parents. She let me do all the dog work, all the hard work. And once I had both of them stabilised health-wise and financially, she persuaded them to kick me to the curb, which is a pattern. So the point of me saying this is that comments like one carer made that if the families did their part, we wouldn't have to. Well, I'm sorry, but I need to rebut that on two grounds. One is, you have a job, do you appreciate it, and are you well paid for it? Two is part of your training that you are not to shame or disrespect family members. And three is, you have no idea the background. My children were devastated, extremely hurt by being kicked to the curb by our parents, my parents, their grandparents. And so if that creates a scenario where, my younger sister said, I'll be in charge of everybody. I'm everybody's authority. I'm everybody's carer. I'm going to financially abuse them. I'm going to neglect them. I'm going to bully them. I'm going to, manipulate land being signed over to my son, and I'm going to clean up all around me and just hold my breath and wait for them to die, and then doesn't call to them, And the truth is, my younger sister might have said to Mum with the bad weather forecast, why don't you come up to the farm just to see out the snowstorm? And because my mother hates being there so much, because it usually entails my father being there as well, and the two of them just being left to get on with things and see to each other and don't complain because they're cold, and just a very oppressive environment. And my mum at 84 still has enough about her to say, no, I'd actually rather be in my own little house and not be in this toxic environment. So, it's not a case of if the families would pull their weight. Although with my younger sister and both my younger sisters, Sharon and Marie, just holding their breath to clean up with everything my parents worked for and we worked for. I worked, as did Kathy and Fiona, from the age of 8, And we were always told, oh, it's family business, family business. You have to pull your weight. It'll all be years when I'm gone and blah, blah, blah. Only for the lying bastard to give it to the two little spoiled brats that Didn't do much other than ride ponies and eat ice cream and chips. But hey, let's not be bitter. So I'm just saying to my mum's home help, I didn't appreciate your rudeness on the street. Your children and the other home help who commented, and then fair play, said, I'm sorry, I was venting and I hadn't watched the video by then, but it is hard. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that in a storm, it's hard for anybody doing crucial jobs in healthcare or fire services or ambulances or hospitals or whatever. I appreciate it's difficult. And I think what I was highlighting was in a crisis where people are snowed in and might have burst pipes and feel vulnerable, and you know, home help's told not to come because they're not insured, then you know, even though these kind of storms only come every 5 years, we might need to think about a higher level of, oh, that's why they say check on the elderly. It's because when they would have normally gone into the post office on Friday for their pension and their batch and their bit of ham and their, you know, whatever might keep them fed week to week, the post office was shut. They weren't able to get out of the house. So literally the elderly could have no food. You know, they haven't got their pension. They might not have fuel. I really, really saw why, you know, you kind of take it for granted when someone says check on the elderly and the vulnerable, you know. And that just came home to me. But the main vent I was having, which got hijacked, was that I couldn't find a plumber. And if anybody was looking for a career, you know, there's certain careers that never die, like a car mechanic or a funeral director or, you know, various careers that are eternal. Definitely, if there are any youngsters listening and you want a career, there is a shortage of good plumbers. You know, and obviously as plumbers, a storm and sub-zero temperatures are going to, you know, make hay while the sun shines. That's when your busy time is. So that's it. I just have been upset all day. I made a correction after the video saying that one of the carers that I know had gone out the day before and had to be rescued by the voluntary fire brigade and brought home. That's awesome. The other lady had been out to 12 patients the day before, and just so happened the day I phoned my mother, which is hard for me. My mother has treated myself and my children appallingly. But, you know, I phoned anyway and said, look, you know, even if the boys just tramp round, do you need anything? And that just happened to be the day when her home help had said, I'm not going outside the door. So to make it about herself and then justify it as reason to be ignorant and rude, I'm sorry, I'm not okay with that. And so this is me having a vent. If you don't like it, unfriend, unsub, don't watch, and move on, you know, move on. But I'm not going to be shamed by you or treated with ignorance by you, or even, you know, give in to the trolls like, oh, good, Angie's upset some locals, let's see if we can enroll them to help us torment her and her children. No, it's not happening. If it is, bring it out in public. Don't just be shitty, you know, behind closed doors. If you want to duke it out verbally, go ahead. But I don't deserve to go to town and be treated with ignorance. You don't know half the story. And I imagine you appreciate your job. And if not, you know. Just one more thing I wanted to say about this, because this has been going on for years. I had an uncle, Uncle Lionel, very wealthy man. He owned a factory in Essex. Children's shoes, exquisite, absolutely exquisite. Babies' shoes, really. And he loved Jaguar cars, and he was always had one at the end of the garden, and he was teaching his sons how to restore them lovingly, and he was kind of a nice man, but he didn't just make his fortune from the factory. He made a fortune from assisting elderly, vulnerable people who maybe had disagreements with their offspring, and somehow managing to inherit over and over and over and over again. I'm not saying that about my mother's home help. I'm not saying that about my neighbour that's a home help. But I'm saying this happens. I'm not going to refuse to talk about the vulnerability of the elderly because I got some backlash from venting during a storm where my mother was isolated as well as myself. You know, a lot of elderly people who may be on the outs with their families and then become very bonded with their home help or their carer or even their milkman, which was, I think, will I say names? I won't say names, but there's a milkman related by marriage that, you know, used to deliver milk to a vulnerable elderly person and inherited their home and sold it and bought a farm, you know. So this happens. This does happen. And so it's a subject, it's a taboo subject. Like my mother would become so bonded, she wouldn't stop to think, wait a minute, my home help's getting X amount per hour. I'm one of 10, 12 clients she's got. She's delighted to have that kind of income. No, elderly people that are vulnerable think, oh, they're so kind to me. They're so nice to me. You know, they do this for me and they do that for me. And, you know, hey-ho. It's just something that deserves, it deserves talking about. I don't care how taboo it is. And I just believe that the elderly are as vulnerable as children, and that part of the state social engineering, if you like, is to make the elderly a commodity. And I'm very grateful that my mother has a wonderful home help. This lady that was rude to me today is very good at her job, very good at her job, very kind, very efficient, very humble. You know, she's well qualified for her job, and I'm very grateful for that. But I'm not so grateful that you can be ignorant to me in the street for making a video which wasn't about you. You know, if you've had such a violent reaction to not having gone out one day in the storm or 2 days, I don't know. If you've had such a violent reaction, then maybe you felt badly about that. You know, maybe 12 clients is, you know, at your age is a bit too much, you know. Because if you look at the old Quaker thing, if there was no such thing as paid home helps and paid carers and so on and so forth, would an estate of a few houses, including plenty of capable, able men, would they accept that a good enough reason for an 84-year-old not to be visited was because the person that would normally visit was not insured? Would they? Or would they get shovels out or tractors or, you know, God knows what, just to beat a path? And the same with myself. I could say to myself, I fell over every time I went out, but it didn't stop me going out. I didn't hurt myself. I just went, you know, down on my knees or on my bum and got up again and soldiered on. But, you know, my point stands. If people wouldn't make it all about themselves and all about being offended and outraged, my point stands that we need to do a little bit better. And if there are able-bodied men that can shovel a pathway, or you know, people that can organise Meath County Council to come and at least clear a safe passage on the roadway of estates, which they did for multiple estates all over Meath, you know, then we could do better. And you know, I don't accept that I spoke out of turn. I'm sorry. I haven't even read the abusive article that was written about it, and I'm sure the home help's daughter and the neighbour that does carer have had letters encouraging them to dish the dirt on me and telling all sorts of lies about me. But, you know, as somebody said, if you believe bullshit about me, you're not friends anyway. So I'm just learning not to kid myself about, you know, who my friends are. It's a very small few. So that's it. I'll see if I've got the courage to post this and deal with the backlash. And the original post, when I get over my 30-day ban, I think I might repost it, because I will not be shamed from talking about taboo subjects.